What's up, guys? So this is a 454 out of a 80s vintage truck, actually. It doesn't really look like it, but um, so this is going in what used to be my old mud wagon. It's not. It's going to be more of a kind of a general purpose truck this time around, but it's all torn down right now. It's nothing but a rolling chassis out back. Um, so this motor, um, I had rebuilt years ago, and by the time I got a drivetrain behind it that would actually hold up to the power, because it started out a half-ton truck with a 305, so it's an 83. Um, it just like I said, it just kept scattering parts behind it. Like I couldn't hold anything together behind this thing, and I finally got 1 ton of axles and big drive shafts, and a tranny and transfer case that would hold up, and I ended up only getting like a summer's use out of it, and I fell into too deep of a water hole, and yeah, you can imagine it ingested a bunch of water, but the problem was a lot of water got into the crankcase from the PCV vent, so it ended up getting a bunch of water in the crankcase, and it washed out the bearings. It took this like fresh motor that was like I was just finally getting to actually use it, and I ruined it. So yeah, there's that. Anyways, so long story short, way later on, I had the crank machined, and just kind of piecing together an engine build over a while. Buy the gasket kit here and do this here and get the bearings, and before I knew it, I had everything sitting here to put it together. So it's kind of cool. This is one of my favorite engines I ever built, man. It just ran really well. It's nothing radical at all. It's the truck peanut port cylinder heads that came on them. And stock crank, stock rods. Like it's just pulling a truck motor. It has a RV towing cam in it, so a little more exhaust duration, a little more low end torque, but otherwise it's just a smooth idling, big lumbering tow motor. So I got the crank turned down to 20 under now, and then yeah, obviously the whole works, new rings. The pistons were still fine. The pistons are flat top, so that is one thing I upgraded. It's got a little compression bump from the dishes that come in them. But it had a cast iron intake on it. And this time around, I couldn't help myself. I had to get an air gap for it. Like, these things are cheap, Yeah, it's made in China, probably, but it was $200. It's a nice dual plane air gap. If anything, you shed, a whole bunch of weight getting rid of the frickin' iron thing, And then I like air gaps too, because you can run all your wiring, what minimal wiring you have. You can run it down underneath the intake, for your water sender and stuff like that. But yeah, if anything, just get one because it's so much easier to deal with, easier to install, But so the valve covers, they come with those stamped units, and that's what it had, the early ones, before you went to Gen 5, which I think was in 1990, when they went to a one-piece rear main seal, and I think they eliminated the provision for a fuel pump on them too. But so that's what these valve covers are off of, and the bolt pattern is exactly the same. They drop right on there, but turns out I had to modify them slightly. You can see this lip that's on the bottom edge towards the outside of the engine. It's kind of to keep the oil splash, away from the O-ring. So this rib carries all the way around, all the way kind of to this corner. And I guess the older heads, you know, the casting is maybe a little thicker because it wouldn't fit down inside the casting. The lip was hitting, so it just barely wouldn't seat. So I don't know. I didn't figure it would hurt any. I just ground the lip back to there. You know, it's going to be an O-ring seal now versus cork like it was. So I don't think it's going to be an issue, and I like these a lot. A lot more than the stamped covers. You know, I don't got to have load spreader bars on it. You know, you just put slap it on. You're good to go. And it's easy to take it on and off too. So I wish I could tell you where I got these. They're little spacer brackets. And it allows you to convert to small block accessory brackets. So when I had first put this in, so this would be Gen 5 water pump and crank pulley here, because you got to figure when they went to serpentine, now you're running on the back of the belt on the water pump, so the water pump is spinning the opposite direction. The early big block water pumps, you had V belts going over, so the pump's going the same direction. So you got to put the reverse flow on there, and then you just got to find one of these, any 90s big block pulley, and then you can put these brackets on and go to small block stuff, because the original drive, the early 90s drive that was on this was all like stamped steel brackets, and I think they like pulled the motor using the bracket. I think it tweaked it, because I fought with that setup for a long time. It kept throwing belts off at high RPMs. So I was looking for a Vortec 454 setup. So it uses cast iron brackets. It's a really nice setup, but they're cast iron. They're really, extremely heavy once again. So I found these brackets, and I'm like, this would be perfect, because I can go to small block Vortec accessories. So, 96 up to 99, 2000 or whatever. The Vortec 350s and 305s came with this setup. So they're aluminum, they're cast aluminum, they're super lightweight. If you don't want to run AC, you just get a dummy pulley. And on the biggest thing, the reason I wanted to go to this setup is you have a 140 amp alternator option now, which was just with a factory part. You couldn't even touch that with the 80s alternators. They weren't. So the only thing you have to do is there's one wire coming into the connector of the alternator to energize it, and you just have to install a resistor in line or a light bulb, and then just run a keyed hot wire to the alternator. But you have to have a resistor of some sort in there. I can't tell you exactly what the value of the resistor, but you can find that information. But and then it uses the regular, obviously, Saginaw power steering pump, and these spacers just bump it all out to work with the typical big block, serpentine pulleys for the water pump and the crank. So it's super slick. It's a really nice system, and it's not, crazy heavy. So yeah, there's that. This is going to be just kind of put together, and then it's just going to sit in the the shop here for a while until I can, put the damn truck together enough to even put the engine in it. But I figured it'd be a good motivator, sitting around here. But being that I don't have a truck to immediately put it in, that's the reason why I've been just painstakingly going through every little detail, even replacing all the hardware and everything. It just makes it look really nice, man. Like this is an adapter little spacer. I'm sure some of you guys seen these before, because this is a the intake is set up for square bore, for a Holly or an Edelbrock. So I'm, people hate me for this, but I love my Quadrajets. Like, I just have had really good luck with them. A lot of people don't like them, but they also don't know how they work and don't know how to work with them. So this is, if it was a real nasty engine with a big cam and all this type of, obviously you would not use a Quadrajet. But I mean, even then you can make them work, but it's a lot more difficult. You're better off just doing a Holly. But for something like this, that you're just, you're just going to be pulling and towing and doing truck stuff. This is a smooth idling engine that has a lot of manifold vacuum, so a Quadrajet just works perfect for them. It's as close as you can get to like bolt-on, like EFI. It just drops on, and they usually just work. They're really good because they compensate based on the demand of the engine. So you can take a Quadrajet off of a small block and a lot of times drop it right on a big block, and they work fine. You'd maybe adjust the mixture screws and play with the adjustable part throttle screw in them, and you can make a Quadrajet work on just about anything. So, I don't know, yeah, it's just going to have one of them ugly carburetors back on it, but yeah, so I'm geeked about this thing. This, like I said, it was one of my favorite engines. It just ran really well. It did the type of off-roading four-wheeling I was doing. It just worked extremely well. Just gobs of torque at really, really low RPMs. Diesel-like operation. So there's that. Okay, so the more important part here, we got an Oldsmobile 455 over here with a turbocharger. It looks like it wants to be buddies with it. So I got two of these motors, just as, cores to try and do what we're trying to do here. At least I can alternate between the two of them. These are for my blue Cobra Jet. I'm sure you guys seen maybe a few of the videos with the old hot rod boat. So it has a temporary 350 just stabbed in the boat right now, just so it still functions and I can still use it. The boat goes like 47 miles per hour with that 350 in it. Like, it's still a fun boat, but it is not fast by any means. It makes a lot of noise and doesn't really go anywhere. With this engine, the one that's kind of blue here, I got 3-4 seasons out of this motor. It ran really good. It hit 63 with this motor, and it's just a real mild cam. That's pretty much it. Like, not a whole lot done to it at all. So it didn't have that aluminum intake on it either. It even still had the factory cast intake. So I don't know, for you guys that don't know about Oldsmobiles, it's a big lumbering station wagon engine. The engine was designed from the bottom up to lug around a big frickin' car. It was not made to run at high RPMs in a boat. Sustained high RPMs is precisely the opposite of what the Oldsmobile engineers had in mind for this motor. I've always wondered why so many of them were used in jet boats, and I think it was just overflow. Honestly, it was the Oldsmobile plant maybe had way more capacity than the demand or something. I really don't know, but I would say a majority of Berkeley jet boats back when they were popular, from late 60s into the even early 80s, the whole hot rod jet boat scene, tons of them were Olds powered, and they're just, people are kind of stuck with them. These guys, they buy a jet boat and it comes and it runs really good, and they're having a blast with it, and then they tear up the engine in 2 seasons because it's totally stock and now no modifications have been done to the oil system. The oil system is what the problem is with the high RPM usage. So, it's just a little bit too much work or a little bit too much time for most people to think about converting over to Chevrolet, because that's what you see on Facebook or a forum, or something along those lines, where somebody brings up the subject of, what do I got to do to get a little more horsepower out of my 455 or my 403, and it's just nothing but a bunch of responses of people saying, tear it out, get rid of it, put a Chevrolet in there, don't go down this path, everybody's tried to do this and it never works out, doesn't matter what you do, you can't make power with them, and blah, and a lot of this stuff is kind of true. You sort of hit a wall, but you can definitely make them stay together with the right oiling modifications, though, which a lot of people don't know about, or, they just, the whole, a lot of the jet boat community, they're just dealing with these engines and just kind of, whatever, just bare minimum to keep the thing going, and the hell with it, just let it have 330 horsepower and have this boat that is only 16 feet and has a 7.5 liter engine in it, and it only goes 56 miles per hour, it's kind of silly, it almost seems like you're deliberately trying to spend as much money as you possibly can on gas for your boat outing, so this has just been kind of I know LS motors up and down. It's what I do mostly for a living is swap LS motors. Like this Pontiac, I did this entire swap, 4L80, everything. I do all my own tuning. I make all my own wiring harnesses. But so people come in here and I'm playing with one of these dinosaurs. A lot of people don't get it. They're like, "Why are you still messing with these things?" I don't know. I guess I don't have a good answer why. It's nostalgia. I don't know. It's cool. It's like, am I going to put those things in every single damn thing that I have? That needs an engine in it. It just seems really boring. As much as I love these things to death, it's nice to just work on something different. And I don't know, the fact that so many people have issues with these things, just makes me kind of want to double down and make one work. So the biggest issue with these is the oil system. They pump all the oil up into the cylinder heads, and it can't get back down into the sump fast enough. Let me see if I can show you here. So it would be that little passage. That's where the oil has to drain back down through in order to get back into the valley of the engine. There's two of them, one at either end, but you figure your boat is angled, your motor is angled way up, and when you're driving your boat, it's always angled up. So all of the oil basically has to go to the rear drains in the cylinder heads. And it's a lot of oil to try and make back through this tiny little passage. You look inside a Chevrolet head or an LS head, there's gaping monstrous holes in them for drain back. But again, it comes back to the original concept of this motor. It's not made to run high RPMs. It was not a concern for them at all. If it hit 4,000 RPMs, it only did it for a little bit, and then it was back down. So there's a lot of things that people do to alleviate this issue. So there's restrictors that you can put in the galleries that go up to the cam bearings, and you can keep a little bit more oil down in the mains doing that. Another thing that people do, you can see all these little feed holes for all the hydraulic lifters. There's kits out there even to do this where you tap all of those holes and put in restrictors into each and every one of those. So that limits the amount of oil even going to the lifters and then in turn up into the cylinder heads. So I'm looking at doing all this type of stuff to try and keep the oil in the bottom end. But an old hot rod trick that you see very seldom, all the oil is coming down through these passages right here. So what these guys would do is drill in here and tap this and literally do an external drain that comes off the back of the head and immediately goes right back into the sump and bypasses all that nonsense up in there, including windage from the crank, and it just goes right back in the sump. So I'm looking at that like, how about I just don't do any of that restricting, right? Let's just do a high volume oil pump, actually. Let's go the other way. Never did a high volume pump, always did a standard pump because, you know, again, you're trying to keep as much oil out of the heads as possible. But if you don't care, if it's all just draining back into the sump very quickly, then I guess I'd much rather a full volume of oil going to everything, including the lifters. So I think that's what we're going to do with the oil system, just to alleviate any the issue. And we're just, you know, I can see, I guess I didn't show you, I'm in the process of building this pan. I measured the space in the boat, and so I'm going to be adding this to the sump. I can't come any farther forward. There's a little cross member that goes across in the boat. It's a 3-point setup. If it was a 4-point mount, I could have the full sump from front to back. But so I'm pretty much limited to that much space, almost exactly. Like this is almost going to touch the stringers. So, but it's not only going to drastically increase the capacity, because originally I think it's a 4-quart pan. Like we got an engine where oiling is a problem. Like, let's not have a 4-quart oil pan, right? So, but having these protrusions is going to make it really nice, because I can bring my oil returns right up into the top of this, you know, and then probably put some kind of baffle on the inside so it's not directly just dumping into the oil, because that would probably cause some kind of aeration. So, but yeah, it's going to be very, very easy to do. I'd also like to, I'm going to add one of those marine oil coolers. I don't know if you guys have seen them. It's just kind of like a tube, and it's just an exchanger. So the lake water will be going through the engine oil cooler after a strainer, obviously. But I think really increasing the capacity that much and cooling it, aside from the drain back problem, like I really want to just make it so I don't got to worry about oiling anymore at all. So anyways, so once we get past the oiling issue, and it's just about making power. Okay, so you need a ton of horsepower with a Berkeley jet. Like how fast you go is just directly attached to how much horsepower. You look at all the Berkeley impeller charts and everything. Everything is based on horsepower. You want to go faster, like you can waste a bunch of time, you know, tinkering with other little things on the boat and the pump and this and that. But the cure is to just, give it a ton of power. So it's hard to do with an Oldsmobile if you're broke, like me. Like anybody can just go out and spend, you know, $2,000 on these nice aluminum cylinder heads for these. But like, no, that's a budget breaker for me. So you're looking at, I'm going through this thing and looking at all these little tiny things that you can do to pick up a little power there, a little power here, 5 horsepower, 10 horsepower. You can go in and port those cylinder heads around in the bowl area. You can fill in the exhaust crossover in these heads, and that really helps the flow on the center 2 exhaust ports. You could put an aluminum intake on it. It didn't have that before, but this is a dual plane. And, I've seen it on engine dynos where an aluminum dual plane versus the cast iron dual plane on an Olds really didn't show much of a gain in power. You lost a little weight, quite a bit of weight, actually, but you didn't gain much in power. A lot of the Olds jet boat guys, they run the Torker, which is a single plane, because you actually do see a bump with those intakes. But so you can see where I'm getting, it's really hard to get past that 400 horsepower mark. You put an even mild cam. You got to start doing work up in the cylinder heads. The spring can't handle the additional lift. You get to the point you got to start machining spring pockets and stuff like that with not much of a cam. So you okay, so even if you do all of those little things and you put the biggest cam you can possibly get into it, first off, you end up with this overly obnoxious engine that is going to be short-lived. It's not going to get any kind of fuel economy. It's a 455. I'm not expecting good fuel economy, but a 455 with a huge loping, thumping camshaft is much less efficient than a smooth idling, running high vacuum 455. So, I start to get to the point where okay, you have all of this stuff done to this engine, and you put it in a car with long tube headers, you're going to put power down. It's going to run. They make impressive numbers with all of these little things done to them. And this is what a lot of the guys don't know who don't know boats. But you take that exact same engine and you put it in a boat with water-cooled log exhaust manifolds, your power output, it plummets. It is log manifolds are the worst flowing exhaust that you can put on your engine, period. If you put cast iron truck manifolds, or car manifolds, I guess it'd be, on these, you would get better scavenging effect and it would run much better. Long tube headers would makes a monumental difference. So you're screwed. You can do all these things and you're still dumping into this open chamber of a log manifold, and it's just negating most of the work that you've done. It's terrible. So I'm looking, and so these guys, what they do, obviously, they ditch the engine compartment and then they go to over transom headers, eliminate that problem. So now you have this engine that's not only got this huge thumping cam, but it has over transom headers, and you're certainly not going to have little seats, jump seats next to the engine anymore like my boat does. The boat is going to be so frickin' ungodly loud that, it's cool. You go ripping around and have fun for 5 minutes and then shut it back down because it's just irritating. You can't even hear yourself think. I don't want that I want a somewhat quiet boat. So it's all bad. So that's where this came from, this concept. This engine has massive main and rod journals in it, much bigger than a big block Chevy. It is a crankshaft that looks like it's made for a diesel engine. If you can keep this engine turning a low RPM but still make power, then it's really ideal for it. It has 8.6 to 1 compression. It has dish pistons in it. You could run this engine on 87 octane. It would not detonate one bit before when I ran it. It's just like I said, it's a station wagon engine. So, I mean, what do you do with a big, huge engine that has no compression, but has a really, really strong bottom end? Like, you boost it. Duh. So the first thing I came to was like, okay, like, well, what's the easiest, quickest way to do this? A centrifugal supercharger attached to the front of it. And they make a kit. There's a kit out there. If you want to spend $3,500 on it, you know, and what you get, it's kind of legit. Sounds expensive, but not something I would buy. I don't, like I said, I'm broke. So, and I also want to keep the engine compartment exactly intact. So, just not an option. The blower would run into the engine cover. It's a huge bracket that comes off the front. There's no way. So, so this is where you end up. And anytime that you see a turbocharger used in a boat, it's the same thing. It's an open engine compartment. You know, they got the thing hanging way the hell up here. It's like an LS motor, you know, and it's all open. It's the same thing. It's a hot rod that you run for a little while. It's not a boat that you go on a long hike up a river and you know, just try and enjoy yourself. It's, you know, I guess if you want to wear earmuffs. So where I want to differ from the stuff that the only builds that you see with turbo boat builds, like they're all open air, no engine compartment. I want to try to water cool this entire thing. So there are marine turbochargers out there that have a water jacket around the outside of this turbine housing. They're extremely expensive. You can the cheapest one I found was $1,200, and it's a tiny little bugger made for a little diesel engine. You would have to have two of them. So again, there's a budget buster. So like, not going to happen. So if you're trying to buy a turbocharger that is the correct specs for a big gas engine like this, like, now is the greatest time to be alive ever. Like, these things are dirt cheap. They don't cost anything, but it's the automotive world stuff, and it's from guys boosting those. You know, everybody and their brother is boosting those things. So because of that, the price of these is trivial. It's kind of laughable how cheap they are. So it's not water cooled though. So if you have a marine turbocharger that had a water jacket right around that turbine housing, like, this is all theory, but why can't you build? I could very easily build a box around the outside of this casting and water cool it and completely encapsulate that housing and make my own water jacket. Submerge the entire housing, literally. It sounds stupid, but I don't foresee that to be difficult to do at all. So, okay, if you try to visualize this, my log manifolds are out here. The flange for the log manifolds is basically kind of right at the bell housing flange here. So it unbolts, and then you have your risers. So ditch the risers. We don't need those anymore. Coming off the log manifolds, you build a Y-pipe to the turbine housing. Back here, this is roughly where it has to sit in the engine compartment in order to keep my engine compartment completely intact. So you build a Y-pipe to this, but you double wall it, and you fill, you would probably, so normally with a jet, you run your cooling water from your pump through your log manifolds first, then into the engine. So that not only puts the coldest water in the manifolds where there's the most heat, but it also preheats the water before it goes into the engine to put some temperature in the motor, because it's really hard to get temperature in your engine when you're running, 65-degree lake water through it. So that log manifold is its own isolated chamber. So you do the same as you did before. From your pump, you go through to your logs, into your engine. after you come out the engine, you fill your Y pipe, right? Instead of going to the risers, you fill that Y assembly, and then you could have it, so you could have a few transfer holes here into this housing that you built around the turbine, which where, you know, the water fills up either side, your Y pipe assembly, and then just ultimately fills up this housing. So the difficult part is you need to diffuse the water into the exhaust stream at some point. So I'm envisioning a pipe welded right to this. Like, this is a cheap turbo. I can modify this housing whichever way I feel like. It doesn't matter. If it burns up, you could just replace the cartridge. So you could weld directly to this and have a pipe that just comes out. But then your enclosure that is made out of probably stainless, if not thick aluminum, has its own tube on the outside of the exhaust tube here. And you clamp your exhaust hose that goes to the transom to the aluminum tube. So it's, and you could bring off the top of this housing and they just kind of jog over here with a water line and have it immediately dump into the exhaust. And that would be the end of the line for the whole system. So your dump here, which would be like, dump it like on the top of this pipe. So it kind of runs off the end of that steel pipe in there and then gets blown out the transom. Again, all theory. I've literally never seen or heard this done. So, but I'm going to start doing it and start setting it up, and I'm just going to see if it works. I have to. It's kind of ideal because I can do whatever the hell I want to do here. And if it doesn't work at all, I haven't cut the boat up. I haven't goofed up the bell housing. I haven't done anything with the logs. I've just bolted a new assembly to them. You know what I mean? So this whole thing, everything could come right out when I go, well, shit, that didn't work, you know. So the debate that I have now with a lot of people, I'm just asking questions, but you go on forums and Facebook, certain Facebook groups, and you get a bunch of experts who are responding to you, which is really great, but then, you know, then they start arguing with each other, which is even better. You know, they start like throwing their credentials at each other and stuff. It's but it's good. If you got experts debating this, then we're on the right track, right? So the issue is a lot of people think that it's flow, it's exhaust flow that turns the turbine here, and it is to an extent, but it's more so pressure and expansion. So when your piston is at the bottom and it just starts to come up and cracks the exhaust valve open, and a lot of people think that the piston is pumping the gases out of the cylinder, and it's really not. The cylinder is filled with extremely hot gas, and as soon as the exhaust valve even cracks open, it ejects itself out of the cylinder. It's at such high pressure. So the higher the temperature and the higher the pressure that you can maintain from the cylinder head to the turbocharger, the better, the more power you make, the more boost, the more the turbo functions like it's supposed to. So you're going to be water jacketing this entire assembly, everything, just to make it safe to be in the boat and to be under the engine compartment. And be cool to the touch somewhat or whatever, but you're inadvertently going to be pulling a lot of heat from the exhaust, especially submerging that entire thing or doing whatever you do there. So, you know, the debate is you have some people who think that the turbo is not going to function at all. It just won't work anymore. It won't even build boost. which I find extremely hard to believe. It just seems like maybe it would slow it way down and make it, maybe lag more. Like I'm only shooting for 5 pounds of boost here, guys. I'm trying to hit 450 horsepower, which you tell that to an Olds guy and he laughs at you like, you're only trying to make 450 horse. What the hell you need that for? You can do this and that, blah blah blah. Again, it comes back to you put it in a boat. Your 450 horse motor has 350, 360 horsepower. It's a huge hit in power. So, will the turbo even function? I don't know. So, I've talked to a few people, and we're kind of bouncing this thing off of each other. If you have this substantial loss in temperature from point A to point B here, you in turn have a big loss in pressure. So, the pressure drop across the turbine is what makes the turbo spool. So if you're killing all your pressure ahead of time, will it even build boost? So what these guys were suggesting is because of you're dropping this pressure, size your turbine housing maybe a little bit smaller, right? Versus what you would normally run as a turbocharger. The AR, the actual specs on the housing, maybe step it down, bring it down to a little bit smaller size, and maybe that compensates for the loss in heat from the manifold or from the cylinder head to the turbocharger. So I'm really curious on what you guys think. I mean, I know it's a lot to take in. But if I can make this work, it will just make a mockery of a lot of what guys have been doing to try and make an Oldsmobile powered boat go faster. Like, so, you know what I mean? Like, a lot of guys have been doing a lot of stupid things with these motors, trying to get them to make a little bit more power and just it's always just laughable. They're like, yeah, man, it runs 57 miles an hour. Like, yeah, yip-de-doo, man. You have a 50 horse outboard and go that fast. So yeah, seriously, like, I don't know if any of you guys know much about turbocharging or not. Let me know. It's definitely going to be something we're going to have to monitor back pressure and exhaust temperature, both of them, because you go into a smaller housing, I may have this crazy amount of back pressure. I'm not really sure on that yet. I do know of people who run that exact turbocharger on a 454, so it's maybe a little small for it. But again, if we're experiencing a loss in pressure, it may serve to be just right for it, or I'm an idiot and this is all going to be a big waste of time. But yeah, let me know, guys. So that about covers that. Yeah, thanks for watching.